Drones hit Moscow, Russians got a new mobilization lows, while Russian ruble is hitting a new big low. Hi, my name is Niki Proshin, and today I'm gonna show you how Russian state media is covering the events inside my homeland. Let's imagine that I am a Russian babushka that wants to know what is going on in my country. And the most obvious way for doing so for a Russian babushka would be tuning in to Russian news on our TV. So that's what we are gonna do today. In previous episode I showed you how Russian state media is covering the war in Ukraine, and in today's episode we'll have a closer look to what's going on inside my country. So the way I'm gonna show you Russian TV is by using this Первый канал. You see this logo? It's first channel, one of the most popular TV channels in Russia. On their website I can actually see what is being broadcasted right now, and right now there is informational channel. The latest news about situation in the country and in the world. The next program is gonna be at 15 o'clock, that's news with subtitles. Right after the news there's another informational channel, the same as this one. Then during the day there will be like two programs about Vera Vassilieva, a memory of her. I guess that's a person that died recently, so they made kind of documentary about that. And between there will be another informational channel, between informational channels there's evening news with subtitles, another piece of news by 9 o'clock, at 10 o'clock there's TV series, 11 o'clock there's big game, which is actually not a game but also kind of news related, political related thing, and at midnight the most interesting thing that I find here, it's called anti-fake, and the description of it is ridiculous. So this literally says that the West puts pressure on Russia with animal hatred. Videos that make you feel a storm of emotions, in reality might be just soullessly and cynically crafted fake. I think that can be a very accurate description of some videos that I see on Russian TV actually. Our first story is about money, about Russian money. The thing that is happening to Russian ruble reminds me the way how you could boil a frog. You know, if you put a frog into a boiling pot, it will like try to escape and try to jump out of it. But if you put a frog into cold water and then gradually, little by little, add the temperature, then it will just stay in, right? At least that's the story. I don't know how a real frog will behave in this case, but anyway, that's what I imagine seeing the Russian ruble rate. Basically, it was gradually increasing, gradually growing. I actually checked my Russian bank's app right now, and right now I can buy $1 for 102 Russian rubles, which is a crazy decrease in Russian ruble rate. The interesting thing is that recently I don't see Russians talking about that much, while by the time when Russia invaded Ukraine, Russian ruble rate also dropped dramatically. By that time I could buy $1 for about 100 rubles, similar numbers as we are having today, but that time it was like Russian people panicking about stuff, and these days nothing really going on. Which also makes me wonder, is there like anything being said about Russian money, about Russian currency in our national news? So let's tune in to first channel and see if we can find any information about Russian ruble nowadays. So let's look if there's anything being said about American dollar or Russian ruble. First let's write ruble. And indeed we have some recent news that feature this word ruble, but most of them are about Russian government kind of putting rubles into developing our country. Let's try to specify and write about like ruble and dollar in the same sentence. Okay, that's more interesting. So here is the latest news about Russian ruble rate related to dollar and euro. It's coming from June 29, 2022, so like a year ago. This piece of news says that Russian ruble is getting stronger and $1 is already 50 rubles, 1 euro less than 53 rubles. So yeah, that's about 1 year ago, by the time when they wrote news about strong Russian ruble, and since that time it was gradually, slowly, like a boiling frog, getting like weaker and weaker to the point when it's like 97 rubles for $1. I'll give the last try to find any news about like Russian currency here. To recent news, it's coming from July 6, 2023, and again July 6, 2023. Good, let's open this one.
The dynamics of foreign trade largely determines the exchange rate of the ruble. It's going down, but there are no risks to financial stability, said the head of the central bank Elvira Nabiulina. We observe peak values on the Moscow Stock Exchange today. The euro exceeded 101 rubles and dollar exceeded 93 rubles. First of all, we must look at the dynamics of foreign trade. It largely determines the movement of the exchange rates. The large-scale boosts of ruble's exchange rate last year was perceived by many as a victory over circumstances. But we must honestly admit that this was the result of a sharp increase in exports and a decrease in imports. Now, the dynamics of the exchange rate carries pro-inflationary risks, and we will take this into account when making decisions.
You know, guys, I don't really get the point what that lady said. I don't know, maybe I'm just stupid and you have to explain me what she meant. Now let's move to the next story. Another story that I have for you today is drones attacks on Moscow. And that started a while ago. The first news about drones getting closer to Moscow, like I mean Ukrainian drones attacking Moscow. We got the news about that at May 9th, and that time our government didn't really talk much about that. They only said that yeah, drones approached our capital, Moscow, and we successfully shut them down. Later on we had a few other cases of Ukrainian drones approaching Moscow, and Russian government every single time was following the same narrative. We deal with the drones well, we shut them down, don't worry about anything. Over the last couple of months, these drones attacks on Moscow became kind of a regular thing. And the last big news about that we received by the end of July. That time, within period of a couple of days, we had drones hitting Moscow city. That is financial center of Moscow with super huge skyscrapers, beautiful buildings, lots of people working in that, and also lots of people living in Moscow city and also in area around that. So I woke up at July 30 and the first news that I read about what's going on there in Russia was an explosion in one of the skyscrapers in Moscow city. And just 2 days later I was reading another portion of news and there was a piece of news about another drone hitting the same building in Moscow city, literally the same one. I'm really curious about what does Russian state media tell about these events to people in Russia. I actually think that you guys and you countries can access more information, more details about this compared to what Russian people see on their TV. Of course, different media around the world cover this story differently, like the left media focus on facts that make Russia look bad, and the right-leaning media mostly cover the other end of the story. And I can see how this is being framed in the media using ground news that provides more or less full picture on what is happening out there. I can see the number of sources and their bias distribution, like this drone attack on Moscow mostly covered by media that are not biased, although there's more sources leaning left than right. I also can see the location of the media, like most of them are from the United States, and there's barely any media talking about this in Africa and Asia. Thanks Ground News for sponsoring this video and also for providing a tool that helps me to develop a well-rounded worldview, including what is going on there in the war in Ukraine. You can give it a try using my link ground.news/Niki Proshin. That's $5 a month for unlimited access on their platform. You can find the link in description or simply scan this QR code. Now let's see what does Russian media tell us about these drone attacks. I think that should be easy to find news about like drones in Moscow. Just type Moscow city and let's see if they have anything to say about that. And we do indeed one piece of news on August the 1st, 2023. The title of this news said that they stopped the attempt of Kiev regime to do a terrorist attack in Moscow and Moscow region. Let's see what actually they say in the news itself.
Tonight we prevented Kiev's attempt to stage a terrorist attack in Moscow and the Moscow region. According to the Ministry of Defense, they used unmanned aerial vehicles. 2 of them were destroyed on approach to the capital, and another one was suppressed by electronic warfare on the territory of Moscow city. One drone was suppressed by electronic warfare and, having lost control, crashed on the territory of non-residential buildings in Moscow city.
I wish they used a different video to show the moment of the attack, because there were people who actually stayed around Moscow city filming stuff, I guess just going with their lives, right at the time when Ukrainian drone arrived. But I think such videos will never be aired on Russian TV, because imagine if regular people will see such videos, they will think that what if
that would happen like with me or somebody I know. So instead Russian news just show very generic stuff. Now let's move to the next story.
The next story is about mobilization, and recently we had a huge update on how conscription and mobilization system works in Russia. I filmed a video about that covering the details of recent changes, and basically the overview of that is Russian government got much stronger control over Russian men. If you're a Russian man and if our government wants to have you in army, you cannot do much about that. You either go to army or you face real severe punishments for that. Now let's see if you can find anything about mobilization on Russian news. That's mobilizatsiya in Russian language. And indeed, we do have some results, a lot of recent news coming from August the 3rd, July 31st, July 25th. And that is actually interesting, guys. I did not have a closer look on this mobilization-related news on Russian media. I didn't see this narrative, but they do have plenty of news about Ukraine mobilizing everybody. Let's have a closer look to that. This is the latest news coming from August the 3rd, 2023, and the title literally says that in Ukraine, the employees of Army Recruitment Office were using cars of ambulance, like ambulance cars, for searching new soldiers. Another piece of news is from July 31st, and it really says that in Ukraine there is a hunt, like they literally use the word hunt, for new soldiers, new conscripts for the front lines. So apparently there is nothing about mobilization in Russia, nothing about changes what we had recently. Maybe I can type voenkomat, which means recruitment office in Russian army. So there are some news about Russian voenkomats coming from August 8, just a few days ago, and basically what they say is about Russian army recruitment offices being set on fire. Recently there was a series of these accidents in Russian regions, and it also says that Russian law qualifies this setting voenkomat on fire as a violent crime, serious crime that might cause up to 20 years of jail time. But there is completely nothing being said about most recent changes, about our own laws related to voenkomats, related to army soldiers, related to conscripts and mobilized people, while they have plenty of news talking about the mobilization process, the animalistic, it's their language, mobilization process in Ukraine. So guys, apparently there's no much things you can find on Russian TV related to these three big things, like terrible drop in like the strength of Russian ruble, the mobilization updates and the drone attacks right to the heart of Russian Federation, which makes me think, okay, if they don't talk about this, what do Russian news actually tell people? And apparently there's like two big categories of news that Russian people see daily. First is anything related to our president. He did that, he did this, he gave medals to this kind of people, he visited that region. Whatever our president does, it's going to the news every single day. And the second category is updates from the front lines about the war, Russia-Ukraine, and basically in our news we can see a lot of stories about successes of Russian army and about failures of Ukrainian army.
Russian troops prevented 6 attempts of saboteurs to attack our positions on the occupied lines in Statovsky and Krasnolimansky directions. The enemy has heavy losses of 60 militants, lots of military equipment is broken too. And another message from the Krasnolimansky section: a disguised stronghold of the armed forces of Ukraine was destroyed there. Oh guys, I think this one illustrates like the situation on Russian news perfectly, because the picture that you saw right now is not something that I deliberately chose to show you. That is exactly the news that are being broadcasted right now. I mean, if somebody in Moscow will turn on the TV, Первый канал, right this minute when I record this video, that's what they will see. Once again, any news that appear on Russian state media tell about good Russia, bad West, bad Ukraine.
Well guys, if you find my approach to videos interesting, you might also like my other videos about what's going on there in Russia, about my life abroad, and also about my travelings to other foreign countries. If you actually like my videos, please subscribe with a notification bell. That's literally the strongest indication for YouTube that you enjoy watching my content and want more of it. Also, if you want to support my channel on a higher scale, please consider becoming my Patreon or YouTube members. Thank you so much for being with me. Спасибо and пока.